Do you want to do more to make impact? How we serve others and our world is how we pay our rent for being here. So get ready to learn how you can make a difference by simply choosing to live and lead with a socially conscious mindset. In this episode of Passion for Impact, I'm speaking with Chris Hatch, CEO of Food Banks Canada. You know, my own passion for impact started back in my radio days with our frequent food drives, partnering with the local food bank to help create awareness and to drive donations. Food banks are at the center of communities and are an example of an organization we can support through our business platforms and people resources. In this fun and super inspiring conversation, Chris shares his leadership tips and best practices for leading a team of passionate and on-purpose people. He also shares so much wisdom on how to lead with impact and, importantly, take care of yourself at the same time. Ready to be inspired, uplifted, and educated on impact leadership? Here we go.
This is the Passion for Impact podcast with speaker, trainer, and socially conscious advocate Tricia Miltimore.
Thank you for joining in. This is the Passion for Impact podcast, where we have one clear goal: to educate, empower, and elevate social consciousness in people, business, and teams. Be sure to subscribe to receive links to featured companies, people, and offers. To subscribe, visit www.passionigniter.ca/podcast. You know, there is a fundamental need that we all share: connection, safety, clean water, and of course, nourishment, food. Now, I'm Italian, so food is a very big part of my world and my identity. I think with most people, it probably is. I'm also a mom, and I cannot imagine not having enough nutritious food to feed my children. And while growing up, we certainly had hard times. Upon reflection, I truly have never had a hungry day in my life. I do not know that kind of pain or need. And I cannot imagine the hardship of not having enough to feed my family. For over 17 years, I worked in radio and media. And every year, in one form or another, we partnered with our local food bank to fill the bus, to stuff the box, hampers, canned good drives, that kind of thing. The food bank is a cornerstone in most communities. Kids can't dream on empty stomachs. Food Banks Canada is helping to change that. And their mission is very clear: to create a Canada where no one goes hungry. And if you're listening and you're in another country besides Canada, I know you have similar organizations in yours as well. This episode of Passion for Impact is featuring my own passion for impact. And my guest today is Chris Hatch, Chief Executive Officer of Food Banks Canada. I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long. He leads a team dedicated to deepening collaboration across a national network of food bank organizations and maximizing their collective impact to assist the people who turn to food banks. Prior to joining Food Banks Canada in 2018, Chris was Executive Director of the Mississauga Food Bank for 9 years. And during his tenure, he was instrumental in delivering a number of transformational and innovative projects, including moving into a new and expanded warehouse, implementing a sophisticated inventory management system. I don't even know how they do it. I've taken tours of the local food bank, even just in our small town, Kelowna, BC, and I'm just in awe. And also, this is very innovative, launching the first aquaponics farm at a Canadian food bank to ensure fresh produce and fish could be shared with food bank recipients across the city. Before joining the food bank, Chris had a distinguished career as a human resource management consultant. He worked with a wide array of nonprofit and multinational organizations headquartered throughout North America and Europe. He was also a notable speaker and author on human resource issues and was widely quoted by major business publications. So this man has so much to offer. I'm excited to, quote unquote, pick his brain. Welcome to the Chris to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Tricia. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about this conversation because it's so close to my own heart. Today's really an opportunity to get to know you a little bit, to find out about your journey. And also, of course, I know many people listening are leaders of teams or in their own organization. And this is also a show about how to integrate impact into our business and organizations and our leadership as well. So It's going to be kind of multifaceted. But what I love to ask our guests this, and anyone who follows the podcast knows I do this every time. 5 words to describe yourself. And being the overachiever that you are, you gave me 6. Down to earth and driven for change. That describes you.
There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can also say, Trish, I play hard, but I work hard.
Nice.
So,
that's important too, right?
Yeah. So my journey's been fascinating getting to where I am at Food Banks Canada. I mean, you talked about where I came from. I think the most interesting thing is I come from 25 years in the corporate world. The high paced, make a lot of money. Was rich, and then going all the way over to the other side to the charitable nonprofit sector, and now finding myself leading the Food Banks Canada organization here in Canada.
So, I mean, I have so much respect for the organization, and I can only imagine the things that you've learned, and now that, from being a part of it from the inside, what would be the most surprising thing that you've learned since becoming involved with the organization as the leader, as CEO?
I think I wouldn't necessarily surprising, but what is rewarding is, we support a very large network of food banks across the country. Most people don't realize how many food banks or food programs there are across Canada. I mean, we're supporting directly 650 food banks and food organizations, and they in turn support another 2,500 food banks and food organizations. So a little over 3,000 food banks and food organizations. And the passion, you talk about igniting passion, the passion, the dedication of this network across Canada to do the best they can with what they have, whether it's food, funds, volunteers, is just incredible. Day in, day out, Tricia, just what they do in normal times. I mean, let alone during the pandemic, which has created all sorts of other havoc for us. But I mean, just day in and day out, they do tremendous work. Again, volunteers, paid staff, community leaders, and it's heartwarming. And again, the other thing I'd say, Tricia, is that the support that you see across the country, not just day in and day out, but even during the pandemic, the amount of support, financial support, food support, volunteers that have come out, risen to the occasion across Canada is heartwarming. And I sort of have a frontline view of that I think a lot of people don't see. And it's just heartwarming to see the call to action and the passion that people have shown towards helping others in Canada, especially now during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's definitely such a need, always a need, but I can only imagine how it's transformed in the last little while. Since 2010, as a system, Food Banks Canada has sourced and shared almost, this is staggering, 1.5 billion pounds of food and shared over 100 million in funding to help maximize collective impact and strengthen local capacity while advocating for reducing the need. I'm curious, why is there such a need? I mean, has things gotten better, or tell us about the need so people can feel more connected to it?
Sure. Let me just take you back to my first day at the Mississauga Food Bank when I first walked in there back in 2005. I had never been to a food bank. I've never volunteered at a food bank. I'd never seen a food bank. I really didn't know what a food bank did. And I was invited to come take a tour of our local city food bank back in 2005. I was still working in the consulting corporate side. And Tricia, I walked in that day thinking I was going to see a small kind of a volunteer run operation. And I was completely overwhelmed by the scope and size of the food bank. And it literally took my breath away to see how big of a warehouse and how much food and how many people were lined up for food. I had no idea the level of food insecurity right in my own backyard, right here in Mississauga. And so that was my first oh wow moment before I got involved in food banking. But I mean, you ask a good question. We get this question all the time. Why is there a need for food banks? And it comes down to, it actually is very simple, actually. People simply don't have enough money to buy the food they need to feed themselves and their family. So it's really an economic issue. You talk about food insecurity, and we have a great saying, we will never feed our way out of food insecurity. It's not about food. Food is just a temporary solution for today, but it's a very complicated underlying economic issue. People just don't have enough money for a whole host of reasons to have enough food to feed themselves and their family. I mean, that's the bottom line.
If you were to give organizations some advice of how to get involved, because I know people listening to this will be like, well, okay, I have this business platform or this organization. I want to be able to contribute. What are the best ways for people to contribute that really do have impact that you actually need?
First of all, I would say find your local food bank. So wherever you are in Canada, wherever you're working or living, there is a food bank and a food program in your neighborhood. So locate your local food bank. And you can do that by simply going to our website at foodbankscanada.ca. You put in a postal code and locate your local food bank. And I would say connect with your local food bank and find out what they need. Ask them what they need. Do they need volunteers? Do they need funds? Do they need food? Do they need drivers? What do they need? And then match it up. Match up your resources with what they need to help with the local food bank and get your employees and your staff involved. It's a very engaging opportunity. I can assure your listeners, Tricia, even during the pandemic, the food banks are doing everything required by public health in terms of physical distancing, PPEs, hand sanitizing, masks. So we're creating a very safe environment for even for volunteers to come work in. So contact your local food bank, ask them what they need, and then go from there.
Okay, great advice. You were in the corporate world, like you had said, and now you're in the nonprofit world. Personally, what has that journey been like for you, and how have you grown? What is the impact for you by being involved in both, but now being involved in nonprofit?
That's a great question. I mean, I've been privileged. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I mean, I've lived the world. I mean, like, I've been on private jets, having helicopters waiting for me to fly to meetings. I'm privileged, if you will, on the corporate world. And then it's all about, making more money for the organization, faster, quicker. And then you go over to the charitable side, which I'm in now, and there's heart there. There's a lot of heart there. It's the intrinsic reward. So you don't get rich working in the charitable sector, rich financially, but the intrinsic rewards, the rewards you get inside your heart are so overwhelming that I can't tell you how great it surpasses any reward you get extrinsically on the corporate side. And it's interesting, Tricia, when I first moved over from the corporate world into food banking, a lot of my former corporate friends were jealous. They were very jealous. I think they wish they could have joined me and or taken the leap or taken the leap of faith. But the intrinsic rewards of working in the charitable sector, helping others in whatever capacity, whether it's food banks or shelters or whatever it is so rewarding intrinsically that I really encourage people not even to make it necessarily a career move like I did, but try it out. I mean, there are transferable skills. I think the other thing people don't realize is the transferable skills from being in business to working in a charity. I mean, charities need, good business acumen. They need HR. They need IT. They need marketing. They need branding. They need all the things you find in an organization. And charities desperately need these kind of skills. So they're very transferable skills. But I would say the intrinsic rewards of what I do now, I see it day in, day out when I meet with people not only supporting the food banking network, but also those on the front line who are actually working with people day in and day out to make their lives better.
Wow, it's a very inspiring story. Okay, so this is an area that I just get really geeky about, I guess is the terminology, is the idea of working with teams and, engaging our people, helping them to feel that they have purpose and passion and mission, not only for the organization, but for their own sense of purpose and self. You were in HR before, working with, I'm sure, consulting on this type of subject with your companies that you worked with. But now, I mean, what is it now working with the teams of people who are in a purpose-driven, mission-based organization? And what can you recommend to those who are not necessarily in the charity world, but with their own businesses to help their teams get a sense of that intrinsic motivation and purpose and that journey? And I know this is kind of a really general question, so I'll let you kind of extrapolate from it what you think you can, but how can we help our teams be more engaged?
Well, and Tricia, let me just add to that question, if you will. During this pandemic, we've been working remotely for 8 months at Food Banks Canada. So I've got an incredibly dedicated team of 35 people. So we run the entire food banking network system in Canada on 35 people. I think wow. I'm surprised how few people we have. So we are a lean, mean machine, if you will. And I've got 35 incredibly bright, incredibly dedicated staff, each bringing different expertise to the party. But we've been working remotely for 8 months now. And that just adds to your question about the challenges for me as a leader, as a CEO, who keep creating the passion among the teams. And to answer your question, some of the things I focus on, I do storytelling. So, for example, today we had our weekly staff meeting with the entire staff, virtually, of course, through Zoom. And I always begin with a story. Today's story was a letter. I read a letter from a donor who was thanking us for all that we do and what an outstanding organization we were and how impactful we were. And especially during these dark times, we brought bright light to the environment. And so I try to keep sharing week in and week out stories with the teams and the staff about the impact they're having. Because I think sometimes, working at home day in and day out, they don't see as closely the impact that they're having. I mean, they're contributing their piece to Food Banks Canada and what we're doing. So I keep reminding them of our mission, number one. I thank them. So I thank them as a CEO. I thank them for what they do. And number three, I try to keep linking them to the outside environment. So here's what I heard. Here's what we saw. Here's the feedback we got. Here's a thank you we got. Here's a story we got from a client. So I try to keep them grounded in what we're doing, even though they can't see it because we're, if you will, locked down in our offices. So that's kind of what I do all the time as a CEO, as a leader of the organization.
Oh, wow. Can I come work for you?
Absolutely. Sure you can. There's never too much passion. There's never too much passion.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and what I love about that is it can be really applied to any organization. I mean, because every organization serves a purpose and provides a service or solves a problem. And there's going to be stories, no matter what it is, janitorial service, all the way to some consulting company, right?
Right.
So there's always stories to be taken from that. Okay, that's great advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
20 years ago, think of yourself. What advice would you have given yourself 20 years ago, knowing what you know now?
I would say don't take yourself too seriously. You're a young buck, trying to climb up the ladder, working hard. It's all about getting ahead. And as I look back, that's not what life's all about. That's not what's important. So don't take yourself seriously. And I would say the other one, Tricia, which I say all the time, is life is short. Life is short. Life moves fast. Live each day is something I live by. So that's what I would say, if I could look back 20 years ago.
Always the power of hindsight, right?
Exactly.
Well, to continue on that theme, because I always find it really interesting. It's easy for myself to look back 20 years and, or even when I just first became a mom and growing my business and whatnot. What about 2 years ago? What advice would you give yourself 2 years ago?
So pre-pandemic.
Yeah, right.
I'll tell you what I said to myself when I got hired for this job 3 years ago. This is a big job. This is a big job I have. And when I got hired by the board 3 years ago, I made a commitment to myself. I just share this with you, sort of an internal thing I said to myself. I said, two things. As long as your health stays good, so your physical, mental health stays good, and I feel engaged in what I'm doing, I feel like I'm making a difference, I'll keep doing. I gave myself, I'm going to call it like a litmus test 2 years ago, or when I got hired, it was almost 3 years ago, saying, check in. So every year I have a check-in point. Am I healthy? Am I still feeling healthy? Yes. And then, am I engaged? Do I still feel like I'm making a difference? Is it engaging? Is it enlightening? Is it enriching work? And if the answer is yes, I just keep on going. So I would say 2 years ago, again, check in on yourself, right? Do your own checkups on yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. So you got this job as CEO of such an important organization. I know a lot of people listening are often in states of transition because they want to have more impact or they're taking on new roles. Was it intimidating? And how did you kind of process that? And I mean, can only imagine there was probably moments of like, I don't know, maybe there wasn't for you, but for me, I always feel like if there's more at stake in terms of how helping other people and the impact, I just feel so much more pressure about it. Did you experience that? What was it like?
Absolutely. And so, I experienced that when I was running the food bank here in our city in Mississauga, but I feel the weight of the world often on my shoulders. I feel a huge responsibility in what we do and the team does at Food Banks Canada. It's this huge responsibility. It's very rewarding. We get a lot of support, as I've said earlier, but I do feel a heavy responsibility. There's so many people's lives in Canada dependent on us providing services to them, which is in the short term, feeding them and their families today. And in the long term, another part of our mission, which is just as critical, is we spend time and resources and have staff devoted to resolving the issue of hunger. Why are people going to the food bank in the first place? How can we prevent hunger in the future, prevent people from having to use food banks in the future, which is a very important part of our mission. So, it's, as I said, very exciting, intrinsically rewarding, but never do I spend a day going by without feeling the responsibility on my shoulders, and the team as well to deliver what we have to deliver and support the network day in and day out across the country.
As a CEO, how do you support yourself? Do you have like groups you're involved with, mentorship groups? Because I do find that with the CEOs that I work with, often it's a kind of an isolating world unless you create that kind of support around you. So how do you do that for yourself?
So that's a great question. So first of all, I would say I'm lucky to have a supportive spouse. So my spouse be on the board of a food bank, so she understands food banking, and she's been very supportive. She encouraged me to apply for this job. So she's been very encouraging, especially when things get tough. So I have a very supportive spouse, number one. Number two, I have a very great lead senior executive team at Food Banks Canada. I've got, we have 5 chiefs, and we do look after each other and support each other, which has been great. And I report to the board of directors. I report to the chair of my board of directors. And we, interesting, especially during this pandemic, Tricia, made a pact with each other that we would look after each other. We would check in on each other. So I feel I have the support of my board chair and my board, and I can talk to her anytime about anything, and vice versa. And then I think the final piece is I also serve on other boards as well, other volunteer boards, and so I have a chance to be with other executives, if you will, to bounce ideas and share ideas and so forth. So my support group comes in different ways.
Nice, but you create it for yourself, and I think that's key.
Exactly.
People need to remember. You got to create it for yourself.
For sure.
Wow. Okay. So with your team members, you share stories to help them stay engaged into the probably the mission of the organization. Mm-hmm. How do you support them? Because I'm very, again, geeky about helping people as the whole person. When we have people working with us, we look after them as the whole person. How do you support your team members as a leader for them to be professionally and personally developing with a growth mindset to reach their own potential in all aspects of their life?
So I have a couple answers to that question. First of all, I have always, even in my corporate world, taken professional development very seriously, and really make it a requirement of a conversation with all staff. How are they developing themselves? How can we support them in their development? And that's no different in Food Banks Canada. We have a dedicated budget to professional development, and we have a robust professional development planning process, follow-through process, assessment process. So we, as a value, we let the staff know we take professional development very seriously, number one. Number two, we've got resources and funds to support their professional development. And I think the most important part, Tricia, and this is part of my value system, is that I let people know that they own their professional development. It's not me telling them what they do in terms of what they need to develop and what course they should take or what workshop they should attend, that they need to own it. They need to have a high degree of ownership for their own professional development. We're here to guide it, support it. We have the resources, but so I instill a high degree of ownership on the staff for their own professional development. So that's an important value that I've had both at Food Banks Canada and in my corporate side as well. I think the second part, and more general in terms of their professional development, is my leadership style is one of risk taking is okay, making mistakes is okay. So I create an environment where we're going to make mistakes, so we accept that. But as long as we learn from our mistakes, as long as we acknowledge our mistakes and we learn and grow from them, to me that's a positive experience. But don't take a risk. Don't hide from something. I mean, try new things. Nothing bothers me more than I hear, "Oh, we can't do that. We know, or we've always done it this way. We can't try something new." That's like, Tricia, that's like running your fingernails down a chalkboard. So I just no. We need to try something new or try something different. So that's how I support the environment of risk taking, the environment of experimenting, the environment of making mistakes, and then more formally their professional development, however formal that is.
Oh, very cool. Allows for a culture of innovation. I want to ask you about your aquaponics in just a second. But before we get to there, if you don't mind me kind of just narrowing in a little bit. So say you have a team member who has tried something and has failed. If you don't mind, can you share that conversation a little bit? Like, how do you manage that conversation? Because I know there's leaders listening right now where those are hard conversations to have. What tips or how do you structure that?
Well, I'll give you a great example. First of all, typically the individual will be, crestfallen and worried and concerned and, worried about maybe losing their job or getting in trouble or whatever. So first of all, one-on-one coaching that's not the case at all. And I got a great example of Food Banks Canada where we had the individual, actually, we had some technology that we tried to develop that didn't go according to how we planned it. And I had that individual come and make a presentation to the entire staff. And so again, to reinforce the value system, that it's okay to try something new, to have it not go right, to learn from it, to make a course correction, and to share that learning. And so, I mean, I think that was as much a learning for the individual as it was for all the staff. We did it as all staff meeting where the person presented what didn't go well, what didn't work, and why, and what we were doing about it. So that's how we dealt with it.
Nice. Well, that's really inspiring.
It reinforces the value system.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, talk to me about this innovative aquaponics. What does that mean? What did you do?
Oh, this is such a joy. This is a passion of mine. So when I was at the Mississauga Food Bank, I happened to trip across an article. Literally, everyone asked, where did I find this? And it was either online or a book, Tricia. I found this thing about aquaponics, and I go, what is aquaponics? I never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. So I read up about aquaponics. And then I said, okay, well, I need to find someone who knows about aquaponics. So I researched all around to find out who are the experts on aquaponics. And I found a company in Wisconsin. So I did try Canada first, didn't really find what I wanted in Canada. I found a company in Wisconsin that are worldwide experts, leading research authors, and build the systems. And I actually went to school. I went to Wisconsin and went to their class, which is a very cool thing. And I got really engaged in it. And I go, this is very cool. We can do this. We can do this at the food bank and do something very creative and very new where we could grow our own vegetables year round. So we weren't going to be based on the winter climate of Canada where you can only get fresh vegetables, during the summer and fall, that we could control our own destiny with it at the food bank and grow fresh vegetables year round. So that's where it started from. And then you add the fish component, and then we hardly get any fish here in this part of Canada. And what we get, has been brought in from the east or west coast. I go, how cool we can grow fresh fish and grow fresh vegetables and give them to the food banks in Mississauga to feed hungry families and hungry people. And so went to school, learned about it, came back, wrote a grant application. I knew, Trish, I knew I'd have no trouble getting the grant for it because it's so innovative. Got funding for it from the Trillium Foundation here in Ontario. And we built an aquaponics farm with fish. We raised tilapia fish, and the fish water, if you will, from the fish is nutrients, is fertilizer, if you will, for the growing the vegetables. In this case, we grew lettuce, mainly bok choy and romaine lettuce. And it grows very rapidly. And so what was the purpose of it? So first of all, we had a very great crop of organically grown lettuce, or in this case, and we had fish, which we had sent off, cleaned and filleted and wrapped and then given out to the food bank. But we also use this as an educational for the school kids in Mississauga. We had school bus after school bus after school bus coming for kids to learn about sustainable growing, environmentally sustainable aquaponics, about fish, about growing. And then we also combined it in with teaching the children about food insecurity and food banking and the food bank in the city. It was a great draw. I mean, I'm so excited about it because we started getting the media got attention to it and heard about it. We were on CBC National News. Then we were on the local Chinese television. We were on the Portuguese television. We were on French TV. And then got overseas. We were getting calls from Germany, from Africa, from other parts of the world wanting to fly over to visit the aquaponics farm at the Mississauga Food Bank. So it just was a great, great, successful, fun, something I would never thought in my wildest dreams would I become an aquaponics farmer. And it would just be so much fun and so successful. And you know what, Tricia, here's the funniest part. There were so many people coming forward, so many organizations wanting to donate money to the aquaponics farm. We had more money than we could spend. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but we could not spend the money on fish food, on seeds, on equipment, on staff. We just couldn't spend it. I mean, that's how successful it's been.
Wow. All because of an article you happened to go by and read.
I know. Well, and I was curious. I got curious about it. And so went to the school in Wisconsin, and we hired them to help build the system in the warehouse in Mississauga. And we dedicated a portion of the warehouse and the farm's there. And people go by on tours all the time to see it.
Wow. That's the power of curiosity in leadership and personally, and also having that, openness to opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah, and and it was so much fun. It was just a win-win-win all the way around. It was great fun.
Oh, very cool. That's a great story. I love it. Okay, so personally, your own growth mindset, what kind of personal habits do you have that helps you to maintain that growth mindset?
You mean growth of character, growth of career, or what?
Growth in general, like just have that general propensity to move forward with a positive mindset and openness to growing, seeing opportunity, creating impact.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Tricia, in food banking, it can be hard sometimes because the need is so large. Sometimes I'm going to use the word overwhelming. And I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about frontline workers as well, who just see the lines get longer and longer, especially for this pandemic. I think one of the biggest challenges for anyone working in this sector is not to get jaded, not to give up, not to get exhausted, not burnt out, if you will. So again, my hat's off to the food bankers in this country, especially the frontline workers and the volunteers. They deal with clients and their situations day in and day out. And so, in terms of my own growth, I've been blessed with an incredible team at Food Banks Canada. I've inherited a great team. I've added to that great team. They're all dedicated. They're fun to work with. So I actually enjoy working with them. We're focused on the common goals in terms of our strategy and where we're heading. And we see the need, and we see the need is just so huge that I think that's what keeps us going is we have this desire, we have this passion, if you will, that we can turn this issue around. We can solve this hunger issue in Canada. We can reduce the need for food banks in Canada. And so I think that's what drives me, and it drives the people I work with, not just the day in and day out, feeding people, as I said earlier, but the long-term game is what drives us, is we can make a difference in people's lives, first of all. And second of all, we can make a difference in society in terms of putting in changes so people don't have to use a food bank. They have enough income to go to a grocery store and buy the food they need to feed themselves and their children. So that's what drives me. That's what keeps me growing, keeps me going, if you will, every day.
It's in my, from my perspective, because I'm not fully aware of all the realities, it seems like such a big goal. What are the biggest moves that need to be made to alleviate hunger in Canada?
Well, this is it. The biggest, it's going to start with the government. It's government, it's social policy. So it's either federal or provincial policy, depending if you're talking about minimum wage or rent control versus, employment benefits, or even during the pandemic. So it's really government, having the will and the attitude to want to make a dent, want to make a change, and the government have stepped up, especially during this pandemic. So you want to be very careful here. There've been some great support by provincial and the federal government and the Prime Minister during this pandemic. But that will get us through the pandemic. But we're still back to where we were. People, there's, when minimum wages are too low, for example, daycare is too expensive. People have only access to part-time work or seasonal work. They don't have access to benefits or a drug program. Housing costs are too high, and all these things come together into what I call a perfect storm. And people just end up don't have the income they need currently to be able to afford food. And food is something they can flex. They pay the rent first, so that always gets paid first, and then whatever gets left over, they try to put food on the table. And so it does come down to, again, as I said earlier, it's an economic issue, but it's going to require intervention by government, federal, provincial government, to go forward from here, to really put a dent in this.
It's so empowering to know that Food Banks Canada is an expert in this field, and your mission is so clear, and that as companies and organizations, leaders, as people, individuals, fellow Canadians, moms, parents, we can help support your mission by connecting with our local food banks, by donating one can, whatever it is, we can have an impact on your mission by simply doing the small steps. And if we all collectively do that, it does make such a difference.
You're right. During this pandemic, I'm going to make a call out, even as an individual, the number of individual Canadians that donated during this pandemic, you multiply that by a large number, it's been very impactful. That's important to know.
Yeah, I love that. It is so true. Sometimes we get overwhelmed by the problem, and we feel like, what can we do? What can I do? Well, there's things we can do, the small steps.
Exactly.
Couple little questions for you that I think are fun, and I always find my favorite book this way. What is a favorite book of yours, or something you're currently reading that you think that other people should really kind of dig into as well?
Let's see. mean, I've been reading a lot of the books about what's going on down in the South in the U.S. and some of the Washington D.C. type books. I've been reading those, get up to speed. That's what I've been reading recently. There's one book after the other that comes out about when things going on down in Washington. It's hard to turn your attention away from it. So,
isn't that true? Right? Okay,
so
how about this one?
I read one on Winston Churchill. The other book I read recently is one on Winston Churchill, which is fascinating about his family, his wife, his kids, about him as a person and his values. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was great because I didn't know a lot about Winston Churchill, especially during the bombings of London.
I find the personal bios just so incredibly fascinating.
So do I.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question for you is also because of the personal side. What is the best wisdom that you have ever received?
Wow. Best wisdom I've ever received. That's a tough one. I would say, as I said earlier, don't even now. Yes, about 20 years ago, don't take yourself so seriously. Be humble. Be humble. Mm. Especially when you're in a leadership role or you're a CEO role, you got to sometimes check yourself and say, be humble, be grounded, be grounded, be humble.
I like that. I think we do need to remember that. Sometimes we can get kind of overtaken by responsibility or
leadership and exactly.
Sometimes ego in there as well. And it can be all kinds of things, but having soul-centered leadership is so important. You exude that. You really give that. I mean, I don't know you personally. We've just met on this call, but I just thank you for contributing your leadership in such a whole way that you're taking care of your people. And of course, you're making such impact as a leader, but also as an organization in Canada. So as a fellow Canadian, thank you for all you and your team do and all the frontline workers. And thank you for taking the time to be on Passion for Impact. This has been a really inspiring conversation. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to get to know you as well, Tricia. Thank you very much.
Happy holidays. We can say that, right?
That's right. We had snow today, so happy holidays.
Passion for Impact is sponsored by the Inspire Store. Need a gift that inspires? Inspire Store features exclusive ethically made goods and jewelry that embodies these 3 words. Yes, you can. Every purchase supports Food Banks Canada. Plus, you will receive Tricia Miltimore's popular personal development Shift Up e-course. Empowerment awaits you. Shop with impact at inspirestore.org.
Such an inspiring conversation. And listen, if you love learning how to live and lead in a conscious and fulfilling way, and you find this show empowering, please share with your friends, rate and review this podcast. Thank you for listening. Remember, cast your vote, make your impact one socially conscious choice at a time.
Thank you for listening to the Passion for Impact podcast. Visit passionigniter.ca/podcast to subscribe for episode notes, links, and special offers from show guests. Cast your vote, make your impact, one socially conscious choice at a time.